When I did the video last week on best teams that didn't win the Stanley Cup, there were a lot of people who said, hey, Detroit should just be the only team that you talk about between like the mid 90s and 2010 or 2009. No. And the reasoning is simple. They were a very good regular season team, but their goaltending sometimes let them down. And Manny Legace, I loved Legacy, man. I did. I remember when Manny Legace was available on waivers, and I desperately wanted the Canucks to pick him up, and they didn't. And I was like, oh, Legacy would be perfect. And yeah, he was a good goaltender. But, man, in playoff series, the numbers just don't stand up. And this was the first of 3 years that he was the starter for the Detroit Red Wings. He shared that duty the second year with Chris Osgood. But the goaltending was an issue. And that's the thing. They had all the talent in the world, but the goaltending had its issues. So we remember Hasek, right? We remember Vernon, and we remember that Osgood did win his share of cups. But there were plenty of years as well. And for people who aren't voting Chris Osgood into the Hall of Fame, that might be part of it. It might be that they look at the Detroit Red Wings, their history, and say, you know what, they had a great run. What happened to them? Sometimes it was the goaltending that let them down. And so they may look at that and say, yeah, it's great that Osgood, won as much as he did. But in the playoffs, there were rounds where he let the team down. Osgood was not in net for this series. It was Manny Legace. And they were against an Edmonton Oilers team that sort of skids its way into the playoffs and then would go on an amazing run in 2006 that started here. This is round one. The Detroit Red Wings, 58-16-8. The Detroit Red Wings, who had won numerous Stanley Cups, and in 2006 it looked like even though we were into the salary cap era now, the Red Wings would get to another Stanley Cup. 305 goals, second in the NHL. 209 goals against, second in the NHL. Overall, their numbers were amazing during the regular season. There was no hint that a team that scored 256 goals, which was 13th in the NHL, allowed 251, which was also 13th. Lucky 13, right? And there's Akbar, there's the Akbar magnet. It's a trap. There was no indication that the Edmonton Oilers would give Detroit much trouble. Although the Oilers, they've been known to pull off the occasional upset. I've discussed them previously in a series from about a decade before, where they upset the Dallas Stars, who had a record not completely dissimilar to the Detroit Red Wings. The Oilers, not scared of a team with a really good record. Now, in Game 1, there was no indication that this was going to go any way other than the way we thought it would, although Dwayne Rollison started stealing headlines even after a loss in Game 1. First period, power play goal for Lang from Yzerman and Shanahan at 4:05. Robert Lang with the Detroit Red Wings at this stage. Then it's a power play goal for Sergei Samsonov, and I'm calling him Samsonov because we never called him Samsonov when he played, so I'll just say Samsonov. From Hemsky and Spacek at 11:44. That tied it up. Second period, Chris Pronger scores on the power play from Spacek and Samsonov at 8:43. So it's 2-1 Oilers entering the third period. But in the third, Kirk Maltby scores from Franzen and Schneider at 13:43 to tie it up. So we go to overtime. First overtime, no scoring. Second overtime, it is Kirk Maltby with his second goal of the game from Matthew Schneider and Johan Franzen at 2 minutes and 39 seconds. And Rollison, again, is the story. 54 saves on 57 shots. Manny Legace saves 23 out of 25. No harm, no foul. Detroit's up 1-0. But Game 2, the Oilers show their fight, and it's Chris Pronger. And, this was a series that showed just how good Pronger could be, and he had an amazing run with the Oilers. And then, of course, the following year, he'd win the Stanley Cup with the Ducks. Pronger would score from Staios and Horkoff at 12:32. And then Jason Williams scores from Lang and Yzerman at 14:50. So 2 minutes later, Detroit ties it up. Second period, Detroit takes the lead. Power play goal by Henrik Zetterberg from Holmstrom and Kronwall at 7:11. But the Oilers would tie it late. Fernando Pisani, who was about to go on quite the run himself, from Michael Pekka at 17:49. And then it's Brad Winchester from Pronger at 18:46. That makes it 3-2 Oilers after 2. And then in the third, they hold it. Empty netter by Jarrett Stoll from Pisani at 19:47. Rollison is the story. 33 saves on 35 shots. Legacy, 20 saves on 23 shots. So for Rollison, that's 87 saves on 92 shots? That's not bad. 5 goals allowed on 92 shots isn't bad. That's a pretty good road trip right there. So they go home. and they assert themselves at home. The Oilers show, hey, we're in this. Spacek scores from Winchester and Ryan Smith at 4:17. Power play goal then by Detroit. Zetterberg scores from Schneider and Kronwall at 12:05. The Oilers do restore the lead later in the period. Ryan Smith from Winchester and Horkoff at 16:38, and then in the second, they extend that lead. It's a power play goal by Rafi Torres from Pronger and Horkoff at 2:38. So we go into the third period, it's a 3-1 lead. But Detroit isn't going away either. So while we discuss this as this great upset, Detroit did show a lot of fight as well. Power play goal Zetterberg from Williams and Lidstrom at 11:52, and then 18 seconds later, it's Matthew Schneider with the goal from Steve Yzerman at 12 minutes and 10 seconds. First overtime, no scoring. Second overtime, Stahl would score from Samsonov and Horkoff, 8 minutes and 44 seconds. Now, worthy of note in this is that 4 games you have Yzerman in, and 2 games you don't. So Yzerman did not play the whole series. This is where we're already looking at Yzerman's deteriorating ability to play every game in a series. So game 4, and I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just saying this is where Detroit really has they had 58 wins, but they're not as strong as they were in previous seasons. So power play goal by Pisani in game 4 gives the Oilers a 1-0 lead from Torres and Horkoff at 7:22. But again, Detroit showed fight back here. Holmstrom from Schneider and Lang at 13:25, and then in the last minute of the period, Lang scores from Datsuk and Kronwall at 19:23. Second period, Spacek scores on the power play from Hemsky and Samsonov at 4:03, and we go into the third period tied. In the third, again, it's the power play. Detroit's power play is lethal. It's Lidstrom from Schneider and Lang at 6:44, and then Zetterberg scores from Datsuk and Schneider at 15:53, and that ends it. So Legacy, 24 saves on 26 shots in the victory, and Rolison, 27 saves on 31 shots. Now, Rolison saved 44 out of 47 here, 54 out of 57 here, 33 out of 35 here. You see 27 out of 31, and you're thinking, so is he wearing down? How much longer can Rolison possibly go before he wears down? And the answer would be all the way till the finals. Now, Game 5, this is in Detroit. There's no scoring in the first, and Detroit plays very, very well defensively. They do. They don't allow a ton of shots, but when Edmonton gets their shots, they make them count. Second period, it's Pisani on the board again from Pronger and Torres at 5:16, and then it's a power play goal for Ryan Smith from Stahl and Pronger at 8:34. And then Horkoff scores from Jason Smith and Pronger at 12:36 to make it 3-0 to a silenced Joe Louis crowd. Shanahan would score to make it 3-1 at 18:39 to bring the crowd a bit back to life. And in the third period, 20 seconds left, Zetterberg scores from Datsuk and Holmstrom. So at 19:38, 22 seconds left. 22 technically. Zetterberg makes it close, but that's as close as they're going to get. Rolison saves 30 out of 32 in the victory. Guess he's still got some gas in him. And Legacy, 16 saves on 19 shots. Those 3 goals in a 7-minute period of the second period. That's what is this tale of that game. So Detroit can't fight back against Rolison, who's in the midst of stealing one. So Game 6 in Edmonton. Detroit having won 1 out of 2 in Edmonton. They'd only won 1 out of 3 at home, so they might have felt better going on the road at that point. Zetterberg scores in the first period to make him feel even better from Samuelson, that's Michael Samuelson, and Lilia at 14:36. Then in the second period, again, just past the 14-minute mark, Lang from Yzerman and Schneider at 14:02. So Yzerman's in the lineup. Here we go. Yzerman's proven he can take this team to a cup on one leg. So we go to the third period with a 2-0 lead for Detroit. Things look pretty solid. And at that stage, I remember thinking, well, I guess they're going to a Game 7. We'll see how Edmonton does in a Game 7. But early on, power play goal by Pisani from Stahl and Smith at 2 minutes and 56 seconds. And Pisani scores again. Fernando Pisani, who became a big hero. And yeah, it was like the John Druce rule that this was his time, and then it just went away. Pisani scores from Smith and Murray. That's Rem Murray at 6:40. And then Franzen scores to make it 3-2. Restores that lead for Detroit from Cleary and Maltby at 10:07. So it's good. Detroit's going home. They're going to go to Game 7. But a power play for the Oilers, and Detroit can't kill it. Hemsky scores from Horkoff and Samsonov at 16:07. All right, so we're going to go to overtime. No. Hemsky says no. Samsonov and Stahl with the assists at 18:54. And with a team that really doesn't have that big superstar forward, they've got Pronger on the blue line. They don't have a big superstar forward. There isn't any one guy you're trying to shut down. Pisani wasn't a superstar before this series. And so Detroit just can't keep the Edmonton Oilers off the board. Legacy saves 26 out of 30 in the loss. Rolison saves 33 out of 36 as he becomes a folk hero in Edmonton. Takes his place alongside names like Curtis Joseph and Grant Fuhr as playoff heroes for this franchise. And they knock off the Detroit Red Wings in round one. Absolute, complete, and total stunner. While Carolina's getting ready to go on an amazing run in one conference, Edmonton has got off to an amazing start in this one. So, coming out of the lockout, we have some unusual teams getting through the first round of the playoffs. Of course, Detroit will go back and win a Stanley Cup a couple of years after this, but in 2006, they're left scratching their heads a little bit. Schneider had a goal and 7 assists in this series, so Matthew Schneider had a very good series. Zetterberg had 6 goals. Lang had 3 goals and 3 assists. Yzerman played 4 games, had 4 assists in the 4 games he played. Datsuk played 5 games. He had 3 assists in the 5 games he played. Lidstrom, 1 goal, 1 assist, and really standing out with Nick Lidstrom as he was a -4 in the series. The Oilers didn't have much trouble when Lidstrom was on the ice, comparatively speaking, with other teams throughout his career. Shanahan, a goal and an assist, and Chris Chelios was held off the board altogether. Legacy, 2-4 with an .884 save percentage. Again, good goaltender, but in this series it just didn't work. So when you look at how many Stanley Cup rings Detroit had and how many they didn't have, I've said this before, if you add Roberto Luongo to this team playing the way that he was in Florida, the Detroit Red Wings don't lose as often as they do in the playoffs. But that's an opinion I've had for a very long time. Pronger, 2 goals, 5 assists in this series. Horkoff, 1 goal, 6 assists. Pisani, 5 goals and an assist. Samsonov, a goal and 5 assists. And Stahl, 2 goals, 3 assists. For, again, a team that didn't really have a superstar up front. I know Ryan Smith was Mr. Oiler at that time, but he wasn't really a superstar. And this was just a good, hard-working bunch that galvanized with each other at the exact right time and got the Oilers over the hump. So Rolison was 4-2 in this series with a .929 save percentage. That's not too shabby. And the Oilers, of course, would move on to lose in the Stanley Cup Finals, but it was a great run. And Legacy and Osgood were your goaltenders for the Red Wings. They stayed with Legacy throughout the series, and it was the first of 3 years. As I said, the Manny Legacy was their starter. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And remember, stay home when you can. Stay safe as much as possible right now. And hey, I will talk to you again soon.